The freezing Chicago rain was coming down in sheets when Erica's voice tore through the dead silence of the alleyway. "Don't get in the car!" she screamed, her cheap waitress apron soaked, the flickering neon diner sign buzzing heavily behind her. The men in tailored Italian suits froze, their hands instantly darting to the heavy holsters hidden beneath their jackets. The man in the center, Ivan Rossi, the most ruthless syndicate boss on the East Coast, slowly turned around. His piercing, ice-gray eyes locked onto hers in lethal silence. A second later, the black Lincoln Continental right beside him erupted into a blinding, deafening ball of hellfire. There are 3 rules when you work the graveyard shift at the Brass Lantern, a high-end, discreet diner nestled in the shadowy underbelly of Chicago's River North district. Rule number 1, keep the coffee hot. Rule number 2, never look the VIPs in the eye. Rule number 3, hear everything, but pretend you heard nothing. Her name was Erica Hayes. She had been serving black coffee, rare steaks, and discreet silence at this diner for 3 years. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it paid the medical bills for her younger brother, Leo, who was waiting on a kidney transplant at Northwestern Memorial. The Brass Lantern wasn't just a place for night owls and insomniacs. It was neutral ground for the city's elite, the corrupt politicians, and the men who truly ran the streets. It was 2:15 a.m. on a miserable Tuesday when the bell above the door chimed, cutting through the low hum of the jazz playing on the jukebox. The air in the diner instantly shifted. It grew heavier, colder. 4 men walked in. 3 of them were built like freight trains, their eyes scanning the room with predatory precision before settling on the corner booth in the back. But it was the 4th man who commanded the room without lifting a finger, Ivan Rossi. He was a ghost in the tabloids, but a god in the underworld. Heir to the Rossi crime syndicate, Ivan was 32, ruthlessly handsome, and carried an aura of casual violence that made the air catch in the throat. He wore a midnight blue Brioni suit that cost more than Erica made in 2 years. Usual Erica, her manager, a nervous, sweating man named Silas, hissed from behind the counter. "Don't mess up." She nodded, grabbing the silver coffee pot. Her hands were steady, perfected by years of practice. She walked over, keeping her gaze respectfully lowered. "Black coffee, Mr. Rossi. Sirloin, rare," she murmured, setting the heavy ceramic mug on the table. Ivan didn't look at her. He was deep in a hushed, intense conversation with his underboss, an older, scarred man named Arthur the Razor Bianchi. "The shipments at the docks are delayed," Arthur muttered, tapping a heavy gold ring against the table. "Somebody tipped off the feds. It's an inside job, Dom." "Find the rat," Ivan replied, his voice a low, terrifying baritone that sent a shiver down Erica's spine. "And when you do, make sure they don't have a tongue to speak to the feds ever again." Erica swallowed hard and stepped away, retreating to the safety of the counter. She busied herself with wiping down the espresso machine, but her eyes flicked to the rain-streaked window looking out into the back alley. Ivan's signature black Lincoln Continental was parked directly under the flickering street lamp. That's when she saw him. A figure dressed in a dark mechanic's jumpsuit, wearing a black baseball cap pulled low over his face. He wasn't one of Ivan's guards. They were stationed at the front and side entrances. This man was on his back, sliding out from underneath the undercarriage of the Lincoln. Erica's breath hitched. The alley was dark, but the brief flare of the street lamp illuminated something chilling. The man wasn't just holding a wrench. He was holding a small, blinking remote trigger. He hastily shoved it into his pocket, looked around nervously, and sprinted away into the stormy darkness. Her heart began to hammer violently against her ribs. "Mind your business, Erica," a voice in her head screamed. "Rule number 3, you saw nothing." But then She looked back at the corner booth. Ivan Rossi was standing up, tossing a crisp $100 bill onto the table. He was adjusting his cufflinks, preparing to leave, preparing to walk right into a steel coffin. Ivan and his men moved toward the back exit, the one that led directly to the alley. Silas, her manager, was busy in the kitchen, oblivious. The diner was otherwise empty. Erica looked at the $100 bill. She thought about the sheer, catastrophic gang war that would tear Chicago apart if Ivan Rossi was assassinated. Innocent people would die in the crossfire. Leo's hospital could be caught in the chaos. Before her brain could logically catch up with her body, she dropped the damp rag. She bolted from behind the counter, pushing through the heavy swinging doors of the back exit, just as Ivan's hand touched the handle of his car door. "Don't get in the car!" she screamed. The rain hit her like icy needles. The men froze. Arthur drew his weapon so fast it was just a metallic blur in the night, the barrel pointed directly between her eyes. "What the hell did you just say?" Arthur barked, his finger tightening on the trigger. Ivan didn't draw a weapon. He just turned, his sharp gaze pinning her to the brick wall. "Stand down, Arthur," he ordered softly. He took a slow step toward her. "What do you know, sweetheart?" I was wiping the window," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the underside of the Lincoln. "A man. Jumpsuit. He slid out from under there 2 minutes ago. He had a trigger." Arthur scoffed. "She's out of her mind, or she's the distraction." "Dom, let's go." "I'm not lying," Erica yelled, stepping forward, desperate. "Please, just check it." Ivan stared at her for 3 agonizing seconds. He was reading her face, searching for deception. Whatever he saw in her terrified eyes convinced him. He raised a hand, stopping Arthur from opening the car door. "Back away from the vehicle," Ivan ordered his men, his voice entirely devoid of panic. They all took 5 steps back, 10 steps. Suddenly, a loud, sharp ringing pierced the night. A burner phone strapped beneath the car chassis receiving a call. Boom! The shockwave knocked Erica off her feet. The Lincoln erupted into a colossal pillar of orange and yellow fire, shattering the diner's back windows and sending a rain of hot glass and twisted metal across the wet pavement. The heat was blistering, singing the edges of her hair. Her ears rang with a deafening, high-pitched whine. She lay on the wet asphalt, coughing, her vision blurring. Through the smoke and flames, she saw Arthur and the guards scrambled, guns drawn, shouting into their comms. Then, a pair of expensive leather shoes stepped into her line of sight. Ivan Rossi crouched down beside her. The firelight danced across the sharp planes of his face, illuminating an expression of cold, terrifying calculation. He didn't look like a man who had just narrowly escaped death. He looked like a predator who had just found a new prey. "You saved my life," he stated flatly. It wasn't a thank you. It was a fact. Yes, she gasped, trying to push herself up. "You're welcome. I need to go back inside." "No," Ivan said. Before she could protest, his large, calloused hand clamped around her upper arm with a grip like a steel vice. He hauled her to her feet, effortlessly dragging her toward a black armored SUV that was already screeching into the alley to extract them. "Wait! What are you doing? Let me go!" Erica thrashed, panic finally clawing its way up her throat. "You saw the man who rigged the bomb," Ivan said, his voice easily cutting through the chaos, "which makes you the only witness I have, and the only loose end the assassin has left. I won't tell the police, I swear." "I don't care about the police, Erica," he said, reading her name tag. He shoved her into the dark, leather-scented interior of the SUV. "I care about the rat in my organization. You belong to me until I find him." The heavy door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness as the SUV tore away from the burning wreckage of her old life. The ride was a blur of high-speed turns, rain-slicked highways, and suffocating silence. Ivan sat across from her in the back of the spacious SUV, nursing a glass of amber liquid poured from a hidden compartment. He didn't say a word, just watched her with those unsettling, calculating eyes. Erica sat frozen, clutching her damp apron, terrified to even breathe too loudly. She had broken the cardinal rule. She got involved. Now, she was in the back of a mob boss's car, heading to a location unknown, entirely at his mercy. An hour later, the iron gates of a sprawling, heavily fortified estate swung open. They pulled up to a massive stone mansion in the forested hills of upstate Illinois. Armed men in dark coats patrolled the perimeter with dogs. "Get out," Arthur growled, opening her door. She stumbled out, her knees shaking, and was ushered into the house. The interior was breathtakingly opulent, but sterile. White marble floors, dark mahogany wood, and modern cold art. It felt less like a home, and more like a beautifully decorated fortress. Erica was shoved into a large study. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a massive oak desk sat in the center. Ivan walked in, discarding his wetsuit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his crisp white shirt, revealing forearms corded with muscle and faded ink. He poured another drink and finally turned to her. "Sit," he commanded. She collapsed into the leather chair opposite his desk. "Let's get something straight, Erica," Ivan began, leaning against the edge of his desk, towering over her. "Whoever planted that bomb knew my exact schedule. They knew I diverted to the Brass Lantern tonight, a decision I made only 20 minutes before arriving. Only 4 men in my inner circle knew that." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the man you saw in the alley is the thread that unravels the sweater," he replied, taking a slow sip. "Describe him. Every detail." Erica closed her eyes, forcing the panic down, trying to recall the frantic moments in the alley. "He was average height, maybe 5'10", broad shoulders, wearing a dark blue mechanic's suit. He had a black baseball cap. A face, Erica. I need a face." Ivan's voice grew sharper, more dangerous. It was dark. He kept his head down," she stammered, opening her eyes. "But when the street lamp flickered, I saw a scar, a thick, white burn scar running from his left ear down to his jawline, and a tattoo on his neck, a black scorpion." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. The air seemed to freeze. Arthur, who had been standing by the door, went entirely rigid. Ivan didn't blink, but the hand holding his whiskey glass tightened until his knuckles turned white. "A scorpion tattoo," Ivan repeated, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "Do you know him?" Ivan didn't answer her. Instead, he walked slowly around his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a stack of 8x10 photographs. He tossed them onto the desk in front of her. They were surveillance photos of various men. "Look through them," he ordered. Her hands shook as she picked up the photos. She sifted through 3-4 pictures of unfamiliar, hardened faces. Then she stopped. Her breath caught. Staring back at her in the photograph was the man from the alley, the burn scar, the scorpion tattoo. But that wasn't what made her blood run cold. It was the man standing next to him in the photo, shaking his hand, smiling. It was Silas, her nervous, sweating manager from the Brass Lantern. "This is him," she whispered, pointing to the scarred man. Then she pointed to Silas. "But why is he with my boss?" Ivan leaned over her, resting his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her in place. The scent of sandalwood and danger enveloped her. "Because your boss," Ivan said softly, his eyes burning with a terrifying dark fire, "is the man laundering money for my rival, the Moretti family, and the man with the scar is Lorenzo Moretti's top hitman. He leaned in closer, his breath ghosting over her ear. You didn't just save my life tonight, Erica. You just handed me the key to destroying my enemies. Ivan straightened up, looking at Arthur. Secure the perimeter. Nobody gets in or out. And Arthur? Send a team to the Brass Lantern. Bring me Silas. Alive. Arthur nodded grimly and left the room. Erica sat there, utterly paralyzed. Her quiet, desperate life was over. She was now locked in a heavily guarded mansion, holding the secrets that were about to ignite the bloodiest Mafia war the city had ever seen. And as Ivan Rossi turned his gaze back to her, a strange, unreadable emotion flickering in his cold eyes, she realized the most terrifying truth of all. She was no longer just a witness. She was his. For 3 hours, Erica was confined to the master guest suite of the Rossi estate. The room was larger than her entire apartment, draped in heavy silk curtains and furnished with antique mahogany, but the locked oak door made it clear. It was a gilded cell. She paced the Persian rug, her mind racing between the explosive fireball in the alley and the terrifying reality that her brother, Leo, was alone at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, waiting for a sister who wasn't coming to visit. Around 5 a.m., the heavy click of the deadbolt echoed through the room. The door swung open, revealing Ivan. He had changed into a fresh black dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up, the top buttons undone. He looked exhausted, yet wired with a dangerous, predatory energy. "Come with me," he ordered. She didn't argue. She followed him down the winding marble staircase, the silence of the mansion heavy and oppressive. They descended into the basement, a soundproofed concrete level that smelled faintly of bleach and old copper. At the end of a long corridor, Arthur stood outside a heavy steel door, his arms crossed. He nodded to Ivan and pushed the door open. Inside the stark, brightly lit room, Silas sat strapped to a metal chair. His face was bruised, his lip split, and his expensive, ill-fitting manager's suit was torn. When his panicked eyes found her, he let out a choked sob. "Erica! Erica, please tell them!" Silas begged, struggling against the heavy zip ties biting into his wrists. "Tell him I didn't want to do it. They forced me." Ivan pulled up a wooden stool and sat directly in front of Silas, his posture terrifyingly relaxed. He unfastened his gold Patek Philippe watch and placed it carefully on a metal table nearby. "Nobody forces a man to launder $3 million through a diner, Silas," Ivan said, his voice a smooth, deadly purr. "And nobody forces a man to hand over the architectural blueprints of my regular establishments to Lorenzo Moretti's hitman." "Lorenzo threatened my family," Silas shrieked, spitting blood. "He said if I didn't help his guy plant the car bomb, they'd butcher my kids. Dom, please, I have a wife." "And I have 30 men who could have burned with me tonight," Ivan replied coldly. He leaned in, resting his elbows on his knees. "Moretti is a butcher. We all know this. But what interests me, Silas, is how Moretti knew I was going to the Brass Lantern tonight. I didn't make that call until I was in the car on Michigan Avenue. Only 4 of my men were on that comms channel." Silas looked down, his whole body trembling violently. Ivan signaled Arthur. Arthur stepped forward, drawing a sleek, silver combat knife from his belt. "Wait! Wait!" Silas screamed, his eyes rolling back in terror. "It was a burner phone. I got a text on a burner phone from an encrypted number. The text just said, 'Lantern at 2 a.m. Package is en route.' That's it, I swear on my life." Ivan's jaw tightened. "Who gave you the burner phone?" "I don't know his name," Silas cried out. "He was one of yours, Dom. A young kid. Dark hair, wore a silver chain with a St. Jude medallion. He dropped it off in the diner's kitchen last week." The room went entirely still. Erica saw Arthur's face drain of colour. "Poorly," Arthur whispered, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. Ivan stood up slowly. Paulie was Arthur's nephew, his own flesh and blood, and a newly initiated soldier in the Rossi family. The betrayal wasn't just in the organization, it was in the inner sanctum. "Arthur," Ivan said, not looking at his underboss. "I'll handle it, boss," Arthur replied, his voice thick with a crushing, agonizing grief. "I'll bring the boy to you, I swear it." Ivan turned his gaze back to Silas. "You have outlived your usefulness, Silas." "No, Ivan, please." Ivan grabbed Erica's arm, gently but firmly, turning her away from the terrifying scene. "Walk, Erica. Don't look back." As he guided her out of the concrete room and shut the heavy steel door behind them, the muffled sound of Silas's pleading was abruptly silenced. She shuddered violently, her knees buckling. Ivan caught her, his strong arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her back flush against his solid chest. "Breathe," he commanded softly, his lips brushing the crown of her hair. "You're safe." But the war just started. By dawn, the Rossi estate was a fortress preparing for a siege. Men with assault rifles paced the rooftops, and black SUVs blocked every entrance. Ivan had made the call. They were moving to a secure, anonymous penthouse at the St. Regis Chicago. The estate was too obvious a target now that Moretti knew Ivan was alive. "We travel in 3 vehicles," Ivan instructed his men in the grand foyer. He turned to Erica, tossing a heavy, Kevlar-lined tactical jacket over her shoulders. "You ride with me. Middle car. Keep your head down." The rain had finally stopped, replaced by a thick, suffocating morning fog rolling off Lake Michigan. They piled into the armored Cadillac Escalade. A young driver named Russo, sweating profusely, took the wheel. Ivan sat beside her in the back, an unsuppressed Beretta resting casually on his thigh. They merged onto Lakeshore Drive. The city looked deceptively peaceful, the skyscrapers disappearing into the grey mist. "What happens to my brother?" she finally found the courage to ask, staring at Ivan's profile. "Leo is at Northwestern. If Moretti knows about me, he knows about Leo." Ivan turned his head, his grey eyes softening by a fraction of a millimeter. "I already have 2 men stationed outside his ICU room. Nobody gets within 50 feet of him." Relief washed over her, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you." He reached over, his thumb lightly catching a stray tear on her cheek. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight to her heart. "You belong to me now, Erica. That means what's yours is mine to protect." Before she could process the heavy, possessive weight of his words, the world exploded. A heavy garbage truck, seemingly out of nowhere, blew through a red light at the intersection ahead, T-boning the lead Rossi SUV. The impact was deafening, sending the SUV flipping through the air in a spray of shattered glass and twisted metal. "Ambush! Get down!" Ivan roared, throwing his massive body over hers, pinning her to the floorboards. Automatic gunfire erupted, raining against the reinforced windows of their Escalade. The glass spider-webbed, but held. Russo slammed it into reverse, tires screeching, but a black van slammed into their rear bumper, boxing them in. "They trapped us!" Russo yelled, drawing his weapon. "Drive through them!" Ivan barked, firing out the cracked window. Russo stomped on the gas, ramming the van behind them, but a high-caliber round finally pierced the weakened windshield. Russo screamed, his hands flying to his neck as bright red blood sprayed across the dashboard. He slumped over the steering wheel, the car lurching sickeningly. Panic seized Erica, but adrenaline overrode it. 3 years of sitting next to Leo's hospital bed, watching nurses and reading medical textbooks, kicked in. She scrambled out from under Ivan, ignoring his shout of warning. She climbed over the center console into the front seat. Gunfire was deafening outside. She grabbed Russo by the collar, hauling his heavy frame backward to clear the steering column. "Erica, get down!" Ivan yelled, laying down, suppressing fire out the window. "He's bleeding out!" she screamed back. She ripped the heavy Kevlar jacket off, tearing the thick fabric of her waitress apron underneath. She shoved her hands directly against Russo's neck, applying massive, agonizing pressure to the severed artery. "Drive, Ivan. Drive." Ivan didn't hesitate. He vaulted over the seat, shoving Russo's legs aside, and grabbed the steering wheel with one hand, flooring the accelerator. The heavy armored vehicle smashed through the blockade, tearing away from the carnage, tires smoking as they sped down the empty service road. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the roar of the engine and her ragged breathing as she held Russo's life in her hands. When they finally crashed into the underground parking garage of the St. Regis, a medical team was waiting. They pulled Russo out onto a gurney. She sat in the front seat, her hands covered in blood, shaking uncontrollably. Ivan opened the passenger door. He looked at the blood on her hands, then up to her pale, terrified face. The cold, calculating Mafia boss was gone. In his eyes was something entirely different. Awe. He didn't say a word. He just leaned in, unbuckled her seatbelt, and lifted her out of the car, carrying her in his arms like she weighed nothing at all. The penthouse was a glass-walled palace in the sky, offering a panoramic view of the fog-draped city. But Erica couldn't appreciate the luxury. She sat in the massive marble bathroom, scrubbing Russo's blood off her hands with trembling fingers. Ivan stood in the doorway, a towel in his hands. He stepped forward, gently taking her hands, turning off the faucet. He dried them with a tenderness that completely contradicted the brutal violence she had just witnessed him commit. "Russo is going to make it," Ivan said quietly, his eyes locked on hers. "The medic said your pressure saved his life." "I just did what I had to do," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Most people freeze," he murmured, taking a step closer. The heat radiating from his body was intoxicating. "You fight. You fought for me in that alley. You fought for my man in that car." He reached up, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "You are not like anyone I have ever met, Erica." The air between them grew thick, charged with an undeniable, terrifying magnetism. She looked up at his lips, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. She closed her eyes, entirely surrendering to the pull. Bzzz. Ivan's encrypted satellite phone vibrated violently in his pocket, shattering the moment. He swore under his breath, stepping back, pulling the device out. "Rossi," he answered, his voice instantly reverting to ice. She watched his face. In a matter of seconds, the color drained from his tanned skin. The muscles in his jaw corded. A darkness, deeper and more malevolent than anything she had seen yet, swallowed his features. "If you touch a single hair on his head," Ivan whispered into the phone, his voice a promise of unimaginable agony, "I won't just kill you, Lorenzo. I will erase your entire bloodline from the earth." He hung up the phone. The plastic cracked under his grip. "What?" she asked, her blood turning to ice. "Ivan, what is it?" He looked at her, an expression of profound regret crossing his face. "The men I sent to the hospital," Ivan said, his voice completely hollow. "They were intercepted. Arthur's nephew. Poorly. He didn't flee. He went to Northwestern Memorial." The room spun. She grabbed the marble counter to steady herself. "No, no, no, no." "Lorenzo Moretti has Leo," Ivan said, taking her shoulders to keep her upright. "He just sent me a video. They pulled him from his bed. They have him at an abandoned warehouse on the south side." A choked, agonizing sob ripped from her throat. Her little brother. Weak, sick, waiting for a kidney, now in the hands of a monster. "What does he want?" she cried, grabbing Ivan's shirt, shaking him. "What does he want for him?" Ivan's eyes were utterly devastated as he looked down at her. "He wants a trade," Ivan said softly. "He wants me to walk into that warehouse, alone and unarmed, and surrender the Rossi Syndicate." He paused, his grip on her shoulders tightening. "Or he wants me to give him the witness who ruined his assassination plot." Moretti wanted her. Or he wanted the king. And he was using her innocent brother as the bargaining chip to get one of them to the slaughterhouse. The silence in the penthouse bathroom was utterly suffocating. The reflection in the mirror showed a terrified waitress from the brass lantern, her apron torn, her hand scrubbed raw, staring at the most dangerous man in Chicago. "I'll go," she whispered, the words tasting like copper. She grabbed Ivan's blood-stained shirt, her knuckles turning white. "Take me to Lorenzo. Give him what he wants. Just get Leo back. Please, Ivan. He's all I have." Ivan's jaw clenched so hard Erica thought his teeth would shatter. He looked down at her hands, clutching his shirt, then up to her desperate eyes. Slowly he reached up and pried her fingers away, holding her hands firmly within his warm, calloused palms. "I don't trade what is mine," Ivan said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated through her chest. "Lorenzo Moretti thinks he's playing chess. He thinks he cornered the king. But he forgot that I don't play by the rules, Erica. I flip the board." He turned and strode out of the bathroom into the massive living area, barking orders into his encrypted phone. "Arthur, assemble the strike team. Heavy munitions. We're going to the old steel mill on Stony Island Avenue, and contact Dr. Harrison at Northwestern Memorial. Tell him to have a surgical team on standby. We are bringing the boy back." She ran after him, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Ivan, wait. If you storm that warehouse, Lorenzo will kill Leo the second he hears gunfire. He has Paulie. He has eyes on the inside." Ivan stopped near the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the fog-covered skyline. He turned back to her, a cold, calculating smirk playing on his lips. It was the face of a man who had built an empire on the bones of his enemies. "That's exactly why we aren't going to storm it," Ivan said, pulling a sleek, matte black Glock 19 from a hidden compartment under the mahogany coffee table. He racked the slide with a sharp, metallic clack. "We are going to give Lorenzo exactly what he asked for. A trade." "You just said you wouldn't give me to him," she cried, panic rising in her throat again. "I'm not," Ivan replied smoothly. He walked toward a large, silver Halliburton briefcase sitting near the door. He popped the latches. Inside wasn't money. It was packed with tightly wrapped bricks of C4 plastic explosive, wired to a digital detonator. "I'm going to trade him the Rossi Syndicate, every deed, every offshore account routing number, and the keys to the kingdom. Or so he will think." "He'll search you," she argued. "He'll know it's a trap." "He will search me," Ivan agreed, locking the briefcase. "Which is why you're going to carry the detonator, Erica." Her blood ran cold. "What?" Ivan closed the distance between them, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. "Lorenzo expects me to bring you, or to come alone. I will bring you. He won't search the terrified, trembling waitress who saved my life. He'll be too busy gloating. And when we are inside, when I have visual confirmation on Leo, you press the button." "But the explosion—" "It's shaped," Ivan explained, his eyes burning with intense focus. "Directional charges. It will blow the steel doors off the hinges and blind everyone in the room for exactly 4 seconds. That's all Arthur and my men need to breach. Can you do this, Erica? Can you hold your nerve?" Erica thought of Leo, lying in a hospital bed, now dragged into a filthy warehouse by ruthless killers. She thought of the fear he must be feeling. The trembling in her hands stopped. A terrifying, icy calm washed over her. "Give me the detonator," she said. The drive to the south side was a death march. The fog had thickened, rolling off Lake Michigan and cloaking the abandoned steel mills of Stony Island Avenue in a dreary, grey shroud. Erica sat in the passenger seat of a nondescript black sedan, the small black detonator gripped tightly in her coat pocket. Ivan drove in absolute silence. He wasn't wearing his tailored Brioni suit anymore. He wore black tactical gear, a Kevlar vest barely concealed beneath a thick leather jacket. "When we walk in," Ivan instructed, his eyes fixed on the road, "keep your head down. Act exactly how they expect you to act. Terrified. Broken. The second I say the word checkmate, you press the button and drop to the floor. Do not hesitate." "I won't," she whispered. They pulled up to the rusted, towering gates of the abandoned mill. Two of Moretti's men, armed with assault rifles, stepped out from the shadows. Ivan rolled down the window, his face a mask of cold indifference. "Rossi," one of the guards sneered, peering into the car. He spotted her and smirked. "And he brought the little bird. Boss is waiting. Get out. Slow." They stepped out into the freezing, damp air. Ivan grabbed the silver Halliburton briefcase. The guards patted Ivan down aggressively, confiscating his sidearm and a combat knife. They barely glanced at her. Just as he predicted. They shoved them through the heavy steel side doors into the cavernous, echoing expanse of the warehouse. The air smelled of rust, damp earth, and gasoline. In the center of the massive room, bathed in the harsh glare of portable halogen lights, stood Lorenzo Moretti. He was an older man, heavily scarred, wearing a camel hair overcoat. Surrounding him were a dozen heavily armed men. And tied to a wooden chair, looking pale, bruised, and absolutely terrified, was her brother. "Leo!" she screamed, lunging forward. A guard grabbed her hair, yanking her back violently. She stumbled, her hand instinctively tightening around the detonator in her pocket. "Erica!" Leo cried out, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I don't know why they took me." "Quiet!" Lorenzo barked, stepping forward. He smiled, spreading his arms wide. "Ivan Rossi, the untouchable ghost of River North. Look at you, brought to your knees by a waitress and a sick kid." "Let the boy go, Lorenzo," Ivan said, his voice echoing off the corrugated steel roof. He set the silver briefcase on the ground. "You wanted the syndicate. You wanted the offshore accounts, the Port Authority contacts, everything. It's in the case. Let them walk, and it's yours." Lorenzo laughed, a dry, raspy sound. "You think I'm a fool, Dom? I take the case. I shoot you. I shoot the girl who ruined my hit, and I shoot the kid. That's how this ends." From the shadows behind Lorenzo, a young man stepped into the light. He had dark hair and wore a silver St. Jude medallion around his neck. Paulie, Arthur's nephew. The rat. "I told you he wouldn't come without a trick, Mr. Moretti," Paulie said nervously, keeping his gun aimed at Ivan. "Check the case." "Open it," Lorenzo ordered one of his men. The guard stepped forward, kneeling beside the silver briefcase. He unlatched the locks. Ivan's eyes locked onto hers across the 10 feet of space separating them. Time seemed to slow down to a crawl. Erica saw the guard lifting the lid of the case. She saw Lorenzo's smug smile. She saw Leo's terrified, pale face. "Checkmate," Ivan whispered. Erica slammed her thumb down on the detonator and threw herself flat onto the concrete floor. The world erupted. The shaped C4 charges inside the briefcase detonated with a catastrophic, blinding flash of white light. The shockwave blew the guard backward, shattering the heavy steel doors of the warehouse into twisted shrapnel. A deafening boom shook the very foundations of the building. filling the air with a thick, choking cloud of concrete dust and smoke. For 4 agonizing seconds, there was nothing but ringing silence and absolute blindness. Then, the darkness came alive. The shattered doors were breached by shadows. Arthur Bianchi and the Rossi strike team flooded into the warehouse like a tide of vengeance. Suppressed submachine guns hissed in the gloom, dropping Moretti's blinded men before they could even raise their weapons. Ivan didn't dive for cover. In the chaos, he moved like a predator. He snatched a dropped rifle from the floor, spun, and fired 2 precise, lethal shots into Lorenzo Moretti's chest. The rival boss crumpled to the floor, his reign of terror ending in the dirt. Erica scrambled across the debris-covered floor, ignoring the gunfire echoing above her. She reached Leo, frantically tearing at the heavy ropes binding his wrists. "Erica! Erica!" he sobbed, clutching onto her. "I've got you!" she cried, shielding his body with hers. "I've got you, Leo! Keep your head down!" Suddenly, a shadow loomed over them. The smoke cleared just enough to reveal Paulie. His face was streaked with dust and panic, his gun trembling as he pointed it directly at her head. "Don't move," Paulie screamed, completely unhinged. "I'll kill her. Dom, call them off." Ivan froze, his rifle half raised, 10 yards away. He couldn't take the shot without risking hitting her or Leo. "Put it down, Paulie." A heartbroken, raspy voice echoed through the smoke. Paulie turned his head. Arthur stepped out of the shadows, his own weapon aimed squarely at his nephew's chest. Tears tracked through the soot on the older man's scarred face. "Uncle Artie," Paulie whimpered, his hands shaking violently. "Moretti promised me a crew. He promised me money. I didn't want to hurt you." "You broke the vow, Paulie," Arthur said, his voice cracking with immense sorrow. "You betrayed the family." Arthur pulled the trigger. A single shot rang out. Paulie dropped his gun, looking down at his chest in shock, before collapsing to the floor. Arthur lowered his weapon, falling to his knees beside the boy he had raised, weeping silently into his hands. The warehouse fell dead silent, save for the crackling of small fires and the heavy breathing of the surviving men. The Moretti syndicate had been entirely wiped out in less than 60 seconds. Ivan dropped his rifle and crossed the room in 3 massive strides. He fell to his knees beside her and Leo, his large hands frantically checking them for injuries. "Are you hit?" Ivan demanded, his eyes wide, panic finally breaking through his icy exterior. "Erica, are you hurt?" "I'm okay," she gasped, burying her face in his chest, inhaling the scent of smoke, leather, and sandalwood. "Leo is safe. We're okay." Ivan wrapped his massive arms around both of them, pulling them tightly against him. In the ruins of a blood-soaked warehouse, surrounded by the remnants of a shattered criminal empire, the most feared man in Chicago held onto a waitress and a sick boy, as if they were the only things tethering him to the earth. "It's over," Ivan whispered into her hair, pressing a fierce, burning kiss to her temple. "Nobody will ever touch you again. I swear it on my life." 6 months later, the sterile, biting scent of bleach and rubbing alcohol in the VIP surgical wing of Northwestern Memorial Hospital felt entirely different. It didn't smell like despair anymore. It smelled like salvation. Erica sat on a plush leather sofa in the private waiting room on the 12th floor, overlooking the sprawling, grey expanse of Lake Michigan. The heavy mahogany doors were guarded by 2 of Ivan's most trusted men, Silvio and Dante, dressed in tailored charcoal suits that perfectly concealed their shoulder holsters. Her knee bounced rhythmically, betraying the icy calm she had spent the last 6 months perfecting. Behind 2 sets of secured biometric double doors, Dr. Jonathan Harrison, the most sought-after transplant surgeon in the Midwest, was performing a life-saving kidney transplant on her little brother, Leo. Ivan sat beside her. He wasn't looking at his phone, nor was he issuing orders to his capos. For the last 6 hours, the ruthless head of the Rossi syndicate had simply sat in silence, his large, scarred hand firmly enveloping hers. His thumb traced rhythmic, soothing circles over her knuckles. "He's a fighter, Erica," Ivan murmured, his voice a low, grounding rumble in the quiet room. He survived Lorenzo Moretti's warehouse. A state-of-the-art operating room is nothing for him. "I know," she whispered, leaning her head against his broad shoulder. "It's just the waiting." The heavy mahogany door clicked open. Dr. Harrison stepped into the room, still wearing his green scrubs, a surgical mask pulled down around his neck. He looked exhausted, but a warm, genuine smile broke across his face. Erica stood up so fast her vision briefly blurred. Ivan stood right beside her, a towering, protective anchor. "The surgery was a complete success, Miss Hayes," Dr. Harrison announced, stripping off his gloves. "Leo's body is already responding beautifully to the new kidney. There are no signs of rejection, and his vitals are textbook perfect. He'll be groggy for a few hours, but you can see him in recovery shortly." A sob tore out of her throat, raw and unrestrained. The crushing weight that had sat on her chest for 3 long years, the unpaid medical bills, the terrifying late-night ER visits, the constant, suffocating fear of losing her only family, finally evaporated. Ivan wrapped his arms around her, pulling her flush against his chest as she cried tears of pure, unadulterated relief into his expensive jacket. She buried her face in his coat, holding him tighter than she ever had. Half an hour later, while the nurses were prepping Leo's recovery suite, the adrenaline crash hit her. "I need coffee," she mumbled, pulling back slightly. "Real coffee, not the sludge from the machine down the hall." "Silvio will go to the artisanal cafe in the lobby," Ivan stated, already gesturing to the guard. "No, I want to walk," she insisted gently, squeezing Ivan's hand. "I just need to move my legs for 10 minutes. I'll stay in the building, I promise." Ivan studied her face, his grey eyes reading her exhaustion. He gave a sharp nod to Silvio. "Keep a 20-foot distance. If anyone gets closer than that, break their jaw." "Understood, boss," Silvio grunted. She took the private elevator down to the sunlit atrium of the hospital. The lobby was bustling with doctors, patients, and families. She walked into the upscale coffee shop near the Streeterville entrance, ordering a double espresso. As she waited at the pickup counter, Silvio stood near the revolving doors, his eyes scanning the crowd with predatory efficiency. "Erica Hayes," the voice came from her left. A man had stepped up to the counter beside her. He was in his late 40s, wearing a cheap, off-the-rack tan suit. His hair was thinning, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, and cold. He held a cardboard coffee cup, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at her. "Do I know you?" she asked, keeping her voice perfectly level. The man reached into his breast pocket and casually flashed a leather badge holder. The gold shield gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Special Agent William Carter, Organized Crime Division," he said, his voice, a low, gravelly hum, meant only for her ears. "I only have 2 minutes before your babysitter over there notices me, so I'll be blunt. You are in over your head, Miss Hayes." Her heart gave a brief, phantom flutter, but to her own surprise, she didn't panic. 6 months ago, a federal badge would have made her faint. Now, standing in the shadow of the Rossi Empire, Agent Carter just looked like an annoyance. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Agent Carter," she replied smoothly, picking up her espresso from the counter. "Don't play dumb," Carter sneered, stepping a fraction closer. "We know what happened at the Stony Island steel mill. We know Lorenzo Moretti and half his crew were butchered. We know Ivan Rossi did it. And we know you were there. If you knew anything, Agent Carter, You'd be making arrests instead of harassing a woman buying coffee in a hospital, she said, her voice dripping with ice. Carter's eyes narrowed. He pulled a folded photograph from his pocket and slid it across the counter. It was a grainy surveillance photo of Ivan and Erica in the alleyway behind the brass lantern, the night of the car bomb. "He's using you, Erica," Carter pressed, his tone shifting to a faux sympathetic whisper. "Rossi is a sociopath. He grooms people to take the fall. You're a waitress with a sick brother. You're the perfect disposable pawn. Right now, he's paying the hospital bills, but the second the Department of Justice closes in, he will throw you to the wolves. Or worse, he'll silence you like he silenced Silas." Erica looked at the photograph. She looked at the terrified girl she used to be. Then she looked up at the federal agent, and a slow, chilling smile spread across her face. "You think you understand the board, Agent Carter," she said, picking up the photograph and tearing it perfectly down the middle. She dropped the pieces into his empty coffee cup. "But you don't even know what game we're playing. Ivan doesn't use me, and he certainly doesn't own me." Carter's smug expression faltered. "If you ever approach me again," she continued, leaning in just an inch, her voice dropping to a lethal, velvet whisper that sounded remarkably like the man she loved. "If you ever come near my brother's hospital room, or if you ever say Ivan Rossi's name in my presence again, I will ensure you spend the rest of your federal career doing background checks on mailmen in Anchorage, Alaska. Do we understand each other?" Agent Carter stared at her, genuinely taken aback. He opened his mouth to speak, but a heavy hand clamped down on his shoulder. Silvio had crossed the lobby in seconds. "Is there a problem here, Miss Erica?" Silvio asked, his voice a deep, menacing threat. "No, Silvio," she said softly, taking a sip of her espresso. Agent Carter was just leaving. His coffee got cold. Carter swallowed hard, shook Silvio's hand off his shoulder, and walked swiftly out the revolving doors into the Chicago wind. That evening, the penthouse at the St. Regis was bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. The sounds of a live string quartet drifted from the grand living room, mingling with the pop of a vintage Dom Perignon cork. Erica stood on the sprawling glass balcony, the wind whipping her silk dress around her legs, watching the city lights flicker to life. The skyline belonged to them. Ivan stepped out onto the balcony, handing her a crystal flute of champagne. He leaned against the railing beside her, his eyes dark and hungry as they roamed over her face. Silvio had already briefed him on the encounter in the lobby. "Anchorage, Alaska?" Ivan mused, a wicked, immensely proud smirk pulling at his lips. "You threatened to exile a federal agent to Alaska?" She took a sip of the champagne, looking out over the water. "I felt it was fitting. I don't like people threatening my family." Ivan's smirk faded into something infinitely softer, infinitely deeper. He took the champagne glass from her hand and set it on the glass table. He stepped in front of her, blocking out the wind, blocking out the city. There was only him. "When you screamed my name in that alley," Ivan said, his voice rough with emotion, "you stopped my heart. I had spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted to kill me, or people who wanted to use me. But you, a stranger with everything to lose, you risked your life for mine." He reached out, his warm hands cupping her face. "You didn't just save me from the fire, Erica. You pulled me out of the dark. You are the only light in my world." Slowly, the most feared man on the East Coast dropped to one knee on the cold glass floor of the balcony. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands flew to her mouth. Ivan reached into his tuxedo jacket and withdrew a small, midnight black velvet box. He snapped it open. Resting on the silk cushion was a breathtaking, flawless, 5-carat emerald-cut diamond, set in a vintage platinum band. It was heavy, ancient, and blindingly beautiful. "The brass lantern burned down," Ivan said, looking up at her with eyes that promised a lifetime of devotion and absolute, ruthless protection. "And my empire means nothing if you aren't sitting on the throne beside me. Marry me, Erica. Rule this city with me." Tears spilled over her lashes, hot and fast. She looked at the man who had kidnapped her, protected her, and ultimately worshipped her. The mob boss who had laid his entire empire at the feet of a waitress. "I think," she whispered, reaching down to pull him up by his lapels, "I can handle the graveyard shift." Ivan stood, slipping the heavy diamond onto a trembling finger. It was a perfect fit. He wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her off her feet, and kissed her with a fierce, burning passion that rivaled the explosion that had brought them together. The war was over. The king had won his greatest prize, and the underworld officially bowed to a new queen. Did you enjoy this heart-pounding mafia romance filled with explosive twists and undeniable tension? Erica's journey from a terrified, desperate waitress to the fearless queen of the Rossi Syndicate proves that true strength shines brightest in the darkest of shadows. If you loved the thrilling dynamic between Erica and the ruthless but protective Ivan Rossi, make sure to show your support. Hit that like button if you want to see more high-stakes romance stories. Share this video with your friends who love a good enemies-to-lovers trope, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Leave a comment down below telling us which twist shocked you the most. Was it Silas's betrayal or Erica's brave sacrifice? Join our community. Stay tuned for more epic tales, and as always, thank you for watching.